This video is going to be covering the growth of cities, not only dealing with the immigrant perspective, but also the American perspective. We're going to be talking about the population boom, the Great Migration, the city life, and the different reforms that happened to improve city life, and the different organizations that came about, like the Salvation Army, the YMCA, and the Hull House. In the course of 30 years, you can see how some cities nearly doubled in their population. And this happened for two reasons. Immigrants were settling in cities, and African Americans were moving out of the South and into cities. You can see that New York more than doubled from 1.4 million to 3.4 million. Look at Chicago. They had less than a million, and they're already at 1.6. So in 30 years, you had a huge population boom happening throughout the entire U.S. People were moving to cities in high numbers primarily because of factory jobs. So it was easy to find a job in huge cities, in large cities. You can see that in 1890, only a third of Americans lived in cities. By 1920, you had half of all Americans living in large cities. This graph focuses primarily on New York City, and it goes from 1790 up until 2000. But you can see how population boomed in New York City in 1910, 1930, and how it just continued to boom up until the 2000s. And the same thing for the other boroughs. It wasn't as drastic, but population was on the uprise because of the amount of factory jobs that were available. Now, the population boom that was occurring happened because of immigrants, but it also happened due to African Americans leaving the South and moving into northern cities looking for work, but to also escape the racist South. This becomes known as the Great Migration, and we'll talk about this in more depth when we cover the Jim Crow South and the racism that they were facing. This map shows the Great Migration of African Americans out of the South and into other cities, and you can see how they moved out west, out into, Chicago, Minnesota, but also up into the Northeast. Now, city life was rough. A lot of the poor families were living in very crowded apartments, dirty. They were smelly, it was disease filled, it was just not a good environment for people to be living. A lot of times they had no windows, no heat, no indoor bathrooms, so they would just use, for example, something like a bowl to relieve themselves and then just simply dump it out the window. So cities were dirty, they were smelly, they were congested. It was not anything glamorous. Eventually, word is getting out about how dirty cities are. One of the books that was written is How the Other Half Lives, and I'm actually going to be providing you with an excerpt of this in class so that you can see exactly what city life was like for these people that were living back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And you could just see in this picture how crowded and how dirty this apartment looks like, and how you just have people kind of all over the place. A lot of times they were so poor that you had multiple families living in a single room. So it was very crowded and, again, very, very, very dirty. City life was bad, and at some point something had to be done to improve the way of life. So you had a lot of different reform movements happen. They started to collect garbage on a regular basis, and they actually started street cleaning because it was really disgusting. People would just throw all their trash out into the streets, and horses would leave their manure everywhere, and people's feces would be everywhere. So the garbage collection and street cleaning was not only to get rid of the smell and to get rid of the garbage, but it was also to decrease the amount of diseases that were occurring in cities. You guys learned that after the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, how you had fire escapes and new fire codes for factories and for work buildings. Well, that also applied to residential homes. And you can see here how new buildings were now required to have fire escapes and to have indoor plumbing. In addition, the government began to break down different cities into strictly residential zones and then industrial zones where the factories would be located. A lot of the people that were living in the cities were poor. So you had different organizations kind of rise up to help out the poor. One of them is the Salvation Army. Eventually, the Salvation Army spreads worldwide, but they would help out with things like food, clothing, healthcare, education. So they were kind of a well-rounded organization for the poor people. You also had the development of the YMCA and the YWCA. One was for the guys, obviously, and then one was for the ladies as well. And this provided a social atmosphere for people to go ahead and gather and just kind of live with each other and enjoy each other's company outside of work or outside of the home while doing something productive. Here is a picture of the YWCA. They would give back to society as well. So even though this was more of a social organization, these things were important to the improvement and the advancement of city life. The Hull House was a home that was settled by a woman named Jane Addams, and you can see her in the picture down at the bottom right. And basically the Hull House was kind of a one-stop place. If you needed a warm meal, you could go there and you could pick up a warm meal. This was kind of like a foster home. This could be a medical center. It was just a place where the poor could go if they didn't have anywhere else to go. So it provided that safety net, that assistance for people that didn't have any other option. So as you guys can see, city life was not glamorous. It was the complete opposite of glamorous. Your notes are complete if you're able to answer the 5 questions. Why was there a population boom? What is the Great Migration? You need to know the conditions of the city life, but also the different reform movements and programs that were created to assist the improvement of city life and to assist the people living in the city. Once you're able to answer these 5 questions, you are done with your video. Just make sure that you answer your blog, and I will see you guys tomorrow in class.